Hello and welcome to the video presentation for Module 6. We're going to be going into the diatonic modes in this video. So first we'll define the term mode, then we'll understand how each diatonic mode is derived from the major scale. Then we'll do some examples of spelling each diatonic mode beginning on any pitch. Okay, so let's go and get a kind of an extensive definition of mode as best we can. And we'll start with what is the original definition of mode, which is kind of helpful for stuff we'll be looking at later on. But the original definition of mode is simply the collection of pitches that are used in a melody and the other characteristics that go along with that melody. So it's really a description of what the melody is constructed out of. So here's a little chant example, and it's written out in modern notation, but this is what the original concept of mode was applied to purely examining something that was melodic, that had no harmonic characteristics. Okay, so if we looked at this and we kind of took stock of all the pitches that were happening in this melody and its structure, we would see, we could make a little account of all the notes, and you could put them in scalar order, right? You could find the note that it ends on and then kind of arrange these and then repeat octaves. But since we're really going for the melody, we're going to just kind of take stock of what's actually here and not what's theoretical, right? So we're not going to go into like transposing octaves and trying to create a scale as we conceive of it, but we're going to examine what is actually here, right? What is actually happening melodically. And so one way of kind of orienting ourselves is looking at what note it ends on, because that is still important, right? We call that the final note. So we'll see that the final note in this chant is G, because that's what it ends on. And it just happens to start on that too. Another melodic characteristic is that a lot of the phrases seem to end on A, or seem to center around A in some way. And so that, in this way of looking at it, is called the dominant pitch, because it is the most important note, maybe secondary to the final, but a lot of the phrases center around that. So one definition I saw was the dominant is the note on which the melody tends to dwell, right? And so we kind of looked at this, we see that a lot of things center around the note A. So we could call that the dominant pitch. Then it has a range. So how far does it extend? And notice that the final note is not at the beginning of the range, right? So if we looked at this, we'll see that it goes below the note G, right? But G is not the final. G is not the same thing as a tonic. And it extends all the way up to an E, right? But it doesn't continue on to G. So this is sort of a different way of looking at notes that are in a piece of music, right? And this is a purely melodic way of looking at it. Because what we're doing with the scale is we're really looking at all the notes that make up the chords of the key and putting those in order. We're not too concerned with how the melodies are constructed, right? We're more concerned with how the harmonies work. And we put those together and call it a scale. This is actually looking at the notes of the melody. We're determining how far down, how far up it goes around a central pitch, which pitches are, the most prominent, things like that. So this shows you that the original conception of mode was completely separate from ideas of harmony, keys, and scales. And that's why this sort of old-fashioned approach was adopted by composers of the 20th century, because they were looking at ways of kind of breaking free from past models. And one was to kind of, examine these old-fashioned ways of looking at music and applying them to something that would be palatable to people listening today. So I think it's just worth kind of noting what a mode is versus a scale. But let's talk now about the modern definition of a mode. And this is much more closely related to the concept of a scale or a key. Okay? So the modern modes are essentially scales derived from the diatonic scale that exist outside of the major or minor harmonic system. So they're just ways of exploring new material that is not necessarily major or minor as we're used to. And there are 7 of these things. We've probably heard these before. One is called Ionian. We have Dorian, we have Phrygian, we have Lydian, we have Mixolydian, we have Aeolian, and we have Locrian. And each mode is derived by constructing a scale beginning on each of the 7 notes of a diatonic major scale. And we'll look at that in a second. But because they start on a different note of the major scale, each mode has a unique pattern of half steps and whole steps. Just like a major scale has a unique pattern of half steps and whole steps that makes it sound like major, each of these modes has a different pattern of half steps and whole steps that make it sound like Dorian or make it sound like Lydian. And the quickest way, and the way we'll kind of focus on to remember the intervals in a mode, is to compare it to the familiar major or minor scale and then alter it. So let's look at the Ionian mode. The Ionian mode begins on the first note of the major scale, right? And since it just starts on the first note of a major scale, just like a major scale does, it is identical to a major scale. So this is sort of a, okay, well, why does this exist mode? But it is theoretically important to start on the first note. So the Ionian scale is identical to a major scale, right? So F Ionian sounds like this. Just like normal old major scale. Mode 2 is called the Dorian mode, and it begins on the second note of the major scale. So starting on the note G in this key. And so now we have this scale starting on G, but we maintain the accidentals that we originally had for our F major scale there, okay? And one way of thinking about this is it is identical to a minor scale, in this case G minor, but it has a raised 6th scale degree. So G minor should have an E flat, but to make it Dorian, we just raise that E flat to an E natural, and we get this sound. Next is mode 3, which is Phrygian mode, and Phrygian mode begins on the third note of the major scale. So in this case, A. And our A Phrygian scale is the same as a minor scale, but it has a lowered 2nd scale degree. So A minor should have a B natural in it, but this A Phrygian scale has a B flat in it. It's the lowered 2nd scale degree. Mode 4 is the Lydian mode, and the Lydian mode begins on the 4th note of the major scale. So in this, basing it off of this scale, that'll be the note B flat. And Lydian is equivalent to a major scale with a raised 4th scale degree. So the key of B flat major, right, should have an E flat, but this has an E natural. A little mistake there, it should say B flat Lydian. Sorry about that. Okay, and then the Mixolydian mode starts on the 5th note of the major scale. So in this case, we'll start on the note C. And C Mixolydian is identical to a major scale, but it has a lowered 7th scale degree. Because C major should have a B natural, but this maintains the B flat from the F major scale, so it has a lowered 7th degree. Okay, then we get to Aeolian, and Aeolian mode begins on the 6th note of a major scale. In this case, the note D. So D Aeolian, if I play it, is identical to a natural minor scale. Okay, so it's minor with no alterations. And finally, the rarest of modes, the Locrian mode. Locrian mode begins on the 7th note of the major scale. So in this case, it starts on the note E. And it is equivalent to a minor scale, but it has a lowered 2nd and a lowered 5th scale degree. So if you think of the minor scale that starts on E, it should have an F sharp and a B natural. But this Locrian scale has an F natural, right, instead of an F sharp, and a B flat instead of a B natural. So those are lowered 2nd and lowered 5th scale degrees. Okay. So let's look at what it means to transpose a mode. So these modes can be transposed to begin on any pitch. They don't have to just start on notes of the F major scale or notes of the C major scale, right? And the fastest way to create each mode is to start with a major or minor scale and alter it to become the mode, kind of like what we were looking at a second ago. So the ones that start with a major scale are the Ionian, the Lydian, and the Mixolydian. And to create an Ionian scale, it's simply just write the major scale. There's no change, right? To turn major into Lydian, you simply raise the 4th degree of the scale. And to turn Mixolydian into turn major into Mixolydian, you lower the 7th degree of the scale. The ones that start on the minor scale are the Dorian, the Phrygian mode, the Aeolian mode, and the Locrian mode. And to make minor into Dorian, you raise the 6th degree of the scale. To turn minor into Phrygian, you lower the 2nd degree of the scale. And to create Aeolian, you don't do anything to the minor scale, you leave it alone. And to create Locrian, you alter the 2nd and the 5th scale degrees of minor by lowering them by a half step. Okay, so let's look at some examples. And here, we'll see that we're asked to start 4 different modes on 4 different notes here. And we'll use our method of comparing them to a major scale or a minor scale and then altering that scale. So let's talk about what they would be. So this is D Mixolydian. So we can create this by simply writing a D major scale, which we should know how to do, and lowering the 7th scale degree, right? In which case that'll be a C sharp. So C sharp, to turn this into Mixolydian, will become C natural. Okay, so that would just be D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and then it would end with C natural. And I'll just go ahead and write the natural so we don't forget it. Okay, and then it's instantly D Mixolydian. And then we end it with the note D to complete it. All right, so that's so much faster than thinking about, the half steps and whole steps that make the scale up. All right, so F Phrygian. Phrygians always start with minor, so we want to start with F minor. And Phrygians always have a lowered 2nd scale degree. And the 2nd scale degree in F minor is G, so this will include a G flat instead of a G natural. Okay, so I could simply start my F minor scale on F, and I instantly get to the G, so I know that that has to be lowered by a half step to become G flat. And then the rest will just be F minor, so we'll have an A flat, a B flat, a C, a D flat. This is all natural minor, by the way. An E flat and an F. And then we have our F Phrygian scale. Okay. E Lydian. Lydian always begins with major, so we'll derive this from an E major scale. And we'll say that the 4th degree of the scale needs to be raised. And the 4th degree of the scale in E major is an A, so this will include an A sharp. Okay, and so we'll start our E major scale, E Lydian scale, on an E. E major has an F sharp. E major also has a G sharp. And since it's Lydian, we'll raise our 4th note to become A sharp. The major scale has a B. The major scale has a C sharp, and the major scale also has a D sharp, and the major scale would end on E. So here's our E Lydian scale. And finally, B flat Dorian. So we'll start with a B flat minor scale, because that's how we get Dorian. And Dorian scales always have a raised 6th scale degree. And the 6th scale degree of B flat would be a G flat, but that G flat will have to be raised to become a G natural. Okay, so we'll start B flat Dorian. Let's go below the staff. B flat Dorian has the same key signature. Well, B flat minor has the same key signature as D flat, so we'll have a B flat, a C, a D flat, an E flat, an F, and we should have a G flat for the scale, but since we're doing Dorian, that will be a G natural. And I'll put the natural there. Then it should have an A flat, and then end up on B flat for our last note. There we go, B flat Dorian. So that is, I think, a lot faster than trying to think, well, okay, B flat Dorian, that's similar to such and such scale. Okay, well, if I started on this note, that takes forever, right? I think it's much easier to just think that Ionian, Mixolydian, Lydian, those start with major, and they alter the major scale in some way. And then Dorian, Phrygian, Locrian, and Aeolian all start with minor, and they alter that minor scale in some way. Okay, great. Well, we'll be doing a lot more of this. So thanks for watching, and I hope that you all have a great day.